All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Dan Gerstein. I'm with Pistol Shrimp, and I am joined here today by another Pistol Shrimper, as well as even more excitingly, Richard and Andrew from MinMax Games. And my brief history, I want everybody else to talk way more, but my brief history is I worked at Toys for Bob with Fred and Paul for over 12 years, most notably on Skylanders and several titles which you may or may not have heard of, but we are recently independent and working on what we are now calling Freestar's Children of Infinity, but previously known as the Ur-Quan Masters 2.
So, yeah, that was its working name. Yeah, it's a sequel to Ur-Quan Masters.
Good.
That was exciting. Should we introduce ourselves now? Or?
Oh, yeah. Well, or we can go. Yeah, go for it, Fred, and then we'll let the special guests speak. We're not special guests.
I'm Fred Ford. With Paul Ritchie, we created the copyrighted works enjoyed in the Ur-Quan Masters back in 1992, and released under that name in 2002 into the open source community, which has kept the game alive for us to now make a sequel to it.
Andrew, take it away. Or
yeah, my turn. So I'm Richard Clifford, and I'm one half of MinMax Games, and I guess my adventure started at Radical Entertainments, where I met Andrew, and we worked there for a few years on Scarface, The World Is Yours, and then a bunch of camps and stuff, and we decided to break off and make Space Pirates and Zombies. And then we made a sequel to that, and now we're working on a couple of little side projects.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, and I'm Andrew. Richard's covered it fairly well. We worked together for about 5 years at Radical. Then now we've been working together another almost 15. So we're coming up on 20 years now, getting close. And yeah, we're excited to talk about Ur-Quan Masters. I've played the open source version, and I played the original way back when I was just out of high school. So lots of fond memories. I remember all the races. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being here. So you set it up just right, Andrew. So I'll just ask. You played the Ur-Quan Masters. That's awesome.
Yes.
Tell us, like, how did you discover the game? What was your first experience of the game? Like, do you still play it, or like how, if you remember things, how recent are your memories?
Well, you've got essentially a super fan with me. It's in like my top 3 of all time games.
Oh, great.
It was the first game and probably the only game that I played in one sitting. And I started in the afternoon one day, and I went right through the night, right through the next day, and then into the morning of the next day. And I didn't stop. And I couldn't believe it. And I've played it multiple times since then. It's obviously was a heavy influence in Space Pirates and Zombies. Like, hey, Mothership, Mothership. And, we were talking about, what worked in Ur-Quan Masters, and we tried to, iterate on that. But man, it's a good game. Like, it is insanely good. I sound just like a super fan, but I just could not believe it. Like, especially like the story and the exploration. It's just nuts how well that all comes together. It's really, really a good game. So congratulations on making something so good.
Thanks.
Well, he's the super fan. I'm just like the regular fan. Because it was 1992, the original, or that one came out, and I think my computer was really bad at the time. I couldn't even run Doom when it was new. So I was a little late for the party, but I remember playing it. I'll be honest, I think it was maybe the open source one that was my first sampling of it, but I definitely went through it, and I'm like, I remember talking to Andrew a few times when we were at Radical before we split off. I'm like, why don't they make these anymore? So we kind of...
They're hard to make.
Well, it's funny, when we started working on Spaz, we had a whole bunch of races, because it was the archetype was Ur-Quan Masters, and you have tons of races, They're like, oh, we got this, the people made of rock, and we got the plant people, and we got these and that. Then over time, we're like, damn, that's a lot of writing and a lot of, and we just kept munching them down and munching them down, and then they just became, they're pirates. They use the same ships as everybody else. It worked in the end, but yeah, there was no way to replicate it. It's because there was so much writing in that game. It was good. Anyway, I'll stop fanning. It was really, really good. I'm excited to be talking to you guys.
No, please keep. While we're recording, while the tape is running, we need this. When we're feeling down or something, we need something good to play. That's seriously, that's part of why we're here. We really
funny enough, I never get tired of hearing that. So,
well, that's great. Well, it made a huge impact anyway.
Well, when you're working on Space Pirates and Zombies, did you have you brought up Mothership and multiple races, but were there starting points for you where you were trying to capture parts of Ur-Quan Masters, or was it just sort of like a reference for I think even Richard said they don't make them anymore, it's because we don't have DOS computers, that's the real reason. No, but was it, how did you emotionally or intellectually associate with that while you were having your own new creative project?
Well, essentially, a lot of it for me came down to the combat as well. I went right back to the super melee mode and everything, right? So I always thought that, having the fuel and the people as the health was cool. That's kind of one of the reasons I think why there is crew in Spaz, and you can shoot the crew into the other ships and things like that. And I know in the code I had places where I wrote launch fighters and things like the Ur-Quan ships, and it was always in my head. It worked really well. I kind of regret us not having gravity wells, but maybe it would have been too close. I don't know. The games are quite different in the end, but it kind of started as wow, this thing was perfect, let's see what we can do along these lines. And Richard and I talked and talked and talked, and then as we talk, he and I are quite opposite in a lot of things, and the thing that comes out in the middle tends to be really good. So I go one way, he goes the other way, and then we argue and argue and argue, and then compromise in the middle, and that thing tends to be a lot better. So that's kind of, I think, what happened in Spaz as well. I kind of miss that because we haven't worked together for almost 7 years right now. We work in the same company, but we're on different projects, and I miss arguing and coming up with something better.
We can have an argument after this if you like.
You do not miss arguing. Don't you dare say that. We'll just start right now.
It's weird because if you argue, it forces you to kind of sharpen up your ideas. Whereas if you just make your own thing, it just can become this amorphous blob of your own stupid preconceptions, which is kind of what I've been doing in my game for years and years and years. Oh, nobody's saying no, so I'll just keep going. And yeah.
Yeah, for Paul and I, we didn't really argue much, but we had, when we were in full swing on Ur-Quan Masters, the original, we had a really fast iteration loop. And so rather than arguing, we could just try. And obviously back then you couldn't have super sophisticated designs in either code or game design. And so just trying things was the way we went.
That's pretty sophisticated in my mind. I mean, it had a lot of stuff in there. So
yeah, we threw out stuff too. We had a whole landing party sequence where you would pick crewmen of specific race types, and they would influence how your landing party did, and it just all became too much bookkeeping for the amount of fun it generated.
Right. Yeah.
And so we threw that all out, and we had when you came into a solar system, your escort ships you could send off into, hey, you go explore this planet, you go explore this planet. And again, it was it was not as fun as you doing the thing.
Right.
So
Yeah, I mean, Richard has had some tears, I know, with stuff on the cutting room floor as well.
Yeah, I think there's probably more game on the cutting room floor for all of our projects, really. But yeah, it's complicated,
yeah,
you know.
Well,
But
that's also we're working with on this project, we're working with people who haven't worked in games before. You know, a lot of people who this is their first project, and you know, I think I don't know, Fred, if you've lost count, but I maybe have lost count of mine. Fred's probably mine times 10 or something. But the one interesting aspect you just brought up is a lot of stuff does get left behind, and you know, getting people to be comfortable with that and say like, actually that's the right thing to do, we should try, and then throw away. And you know, I won't talk about we used to do these live development streams where I'd actually show me building the game we're working on, you know, on Twitch, which is really fun, and I miss doing it. We just sort of have too many spoilers right now, and it would be too difficult to show. But one of the tones that was really useful is to be educational and showing people like, hey, what I'm working on right now, if it's not fun, we'll throw it away. But a lot of our methodology was around exactly what Fred said. I mean, I'd argue that was the Toys for Bob way, which is try, and then don't try to convince someone of anything. Just try it. And if it sticks, it'll stick. But make it easy to try. Sorry, we're getting the full chorus cacophony here. But make it easy to try so that you don't get too invested in it. Because yeah, you could say there's a lot of tears over it. And I can think of some of my, I mean, even on Skylanders, there's stuff that like after 3 projects, I couldn't do it. But, you know, if I also say, you know, after 3 projects, I didn't do it, then maybe it wouldn't have been that great anyway. You know, what it is in my head might be better than anything else. And it's kind of become a whole philosophy in some ways. So I don't know how you use that, if you do just argue about it, or if you do have a process where you've learned, which is like, hey, this is the right way to throw things out.
Well,
Yeah.
sometimes,
Go ahead.
well, we actually when we were working on Spaz 1 and 2, we always considered the game to be like the third member of the team. So we would try all this stuff, and we'd have these meetings and come up with these big plans, and then we'd put them in and get this thing in. It's like the game said no.
Yep.
So we chuck it and do something else, you know, and it would be, you know, it's frustrating, but you know, I generally don't do roadmaps on my projects for that reason. I don't know if this stuff is going to work, and we need to have flexibility to remove things or change things. And you know, we had a bit of an upset with some people with Spaz 2 because we tried to do the multiplayer thing and it didn't really, it was just hurting the game, so we cut it, and some people were pissed, and most people were okay with it. But yeah, sometimes you go into it with the best of intentions, and it's just, I don't know, it's just hard to say. I kind of believe that plans are made to be broken a little bit, if that makes any sense.
A lot of sense.
yeah. Well, I've found that if one does a giant design document ahead of time, and then you make a right turn early on, it's you almost have to abandon the design document, but there's so much sunk cost in a huge document that you've made up front that it's difficult to abandon it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
we
been a
haven't done
benefit
Sorry, you go ahead.
of being so small. We don't make documents at all.
Yeah.
We talk and then go off and do our piece, see if it works, and then that's it. I don't think we have. The only time we made a design document was Train Game, and then that never happened. So we spent weeks working on this design for a game about trains, and then in the end we just didn't do it.
Trains don't run on time.
Yeah, well, you've been well trained. So the lesson learned is never make a design document, or make ones for games you don't want to make, because then they won't get made.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember Spaz 2. We hit the ground running pretty hard on that. We had ships flying around blowing the crap out of each other within I mean, they were just like triangles and stuff, but you know, try to get something kind of fun like as quickly as possible, get the excitement going, can kind of propel you through the rest of the project.
Yeah, that was a weird project because we had to at one point merge 2 things. So there was the whole combat world. I mean, Ur-Quan Masters has this too. Like you have the combat level, but then you've got the overmap, and those were 2 completely different projects. And at one point I just go, okay, I'm gonna merge these two somehow, because the whole overmap was just cubes, remember, on the map, and then 200 other cubes that were eating each other like Slither.io kind of at one point, and it was like, oh geez. Yeah, anyway, yeah, it's very interesting, but none of that was a design doc. It was just us talking, and we live close to each other, so we'll meet in person, and when he moved, I moved, so we just kind of stay close by, talk, and that sort of thing. I do miss that. That sucks that we don't do that anymore, but anyway, someday, yeah.
We can host an argument for you anytime you want. We're here to help.
Referee it.
So were you working with any like outside collaborators, or was it just you two?
It's just been us.
Well, we got a music guy.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, the music, our music, Michael, he comes in at the end, and he's great.
I try to do my own music, and I'm really bad at it, like really bad.
So, and voice actors we had for Spaz too.
Well, that's good almost, because if you put in really bad stuff, then somebody else wants to do it.
Yeah, there's the hierarchy. There's programmer art, which someone will replace. There's designer art, which you have to be careful because someone might think it's real. And then there's real art, so we have to be very cautious. That's me making fun of myself a little. It's cool that you're able to sustain, just 2-person projects. Like I realized that indie over time has changed for a lot of people. Fred and Fred, I guess you were indie before. I've never been indie. I was a Toys for Bob from the cradle, basically. But so I worked there at a very young age, and I had kind of a corporate life, right? And you said you left to start the studio. What was it like being indie when you started being indie? And like, how did you experience it? What was difficult? What was freeing and fun? What was the surprise part where you said, "Oh, I'm going to make a game and it's going to be and we're going to do it together, just the two of us"? And oops, that was harder than I thought.
Yeah, we were. If I had known what I know now, I wouldn't have done it, because it was.
Ouch.
Yeah, well, not that I don't like working with you, but because we just got really lucky. We went. So we had, decent jobs at Radical. We weren't happy by any stretch of the imagination, but we were safe, as safe as you can be. And then we decided, to leave. I got very frustrated on the project I was on. Essentially what had happened was I had been away on leave. My son was just born for a month, and then I was essentially lead designer on what it was I was co-lead designer on a project. And while I was gone for the month, the whole project changed. I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And I left, and Richard came with me. And then we like, well, shit, we better do something, So we went to a pub and decided
you could just stop there, yeah.
To make but we thought, okay, we can make a game in about 6 months, and we can afford to live for 6 months. So, well, Spaz took 2 years. So in the end, I ended up having to mortgage. Essentially, I went down to having $500 headroom on my house, and Richard had some personal tragedy essentially that allowed him to keep working. And
I had to move in with Angela's parents, my girlfriend's parents, and I was living in their chicken farm.
Yeah,
a mobile in their backyard that was sinking into the mud.
Did they know that?
Trying to program a computer with a rooster pecking at the window all day, like it was, freezing my butt off. Like, yeah, it was quite.
Then when we were finally almost done, this was way before Greenlight or anything. We submitted it to Steam because Steam was still like a juggernaut then. And they said no. And we had spent 2 years and we had no money. And we were like, okay. I know Richard was throwing up. It was really, really bad. Like we had completely ruined our lives. But there were a bunch of other littler distributors at that time. And Impulse was interested and they took us. And on Impulse, they really liked the game and they promoted it, and it was their top seller for like 6 weeks. And then Steam actually called me and said they wanted the game, but they wanted it at a much lower price than we were charging at the time. And I said, well, I had to say no to Steam. I said, well, I can't do that, because as it was, the game was supposed to be $20. We were selling it early for $14.99 and they wanted it for $9.99. I think, oh, hell. So I can't do that. So me and Richard talked, but we can't like screw all the players. But then they agreed, okay, you can stay at $14.99. Like, okay, good, we'll do it. And then it got on Steam, and then everything was fine, and it was a top seller when it came on Steam for a few days, and there was much dancing and happiness, but man, it was scary for a while. So knowing all that, and knowing that if somebody had not decided to make that call to us to say, hey, I guess you really can come on Steam, what would we be doing? Gas station? Or I don't know what we'd be doing right now. Like,
something
Sounds pretty
involving a
unheard
chicken
of.
coop.
yeah. So it was very, very, very lucky, and we're very grateful that Steam did call us back. So
Because apparently they never do that.
well, I had, because in the old days they would have a phone number in the email, and I called the phone number, like I'm like, hello, and I left a message, nothing, and they don't tell you why you're not, like they don't tell you at the time why you're not accepted. It's like, sorry, we're not accepting your game. Okay, I guess it's suicide for me. That was it. But no, it's it all worked out in the end, but just by complete luck. And that's why I wouldn't do it again. But working with Richard's been great, but yeah, my hair falls out. Like, it's crazy.
Mine's okay.
Wow. Well, that's so. I mean, like, that's scary. The story you just shared. I'm glad, but isn't all art born of suffering or something? I don't know. There's a trope about that somewhere. But I mean, seriously, like, since you were able to have that, there was the difficult time. Have you found like success and stability just since that, and it's just getting off the ground? The first road bump was hard, and now you've found like there's saner ways to work? Or is it still like, hey, we're living game to game basically?
Well,
I
the
mean,
one
sorry if that's
game
prying.
funds the next game is how Richard and I've always talked about it.
Yeah.
So Spaz 1 funds Spaz 2. Spaz 2 funded, crazy Richard and Andrew Adventure Time, which is what we're in now. That will fund, Spaz 3. So yeah, we're not ahead or behind. We just are, but we are stable. Like, we can survive, and that's okay. We're not like epically successful. We're just like, hey, we can, work from our little dark offices, and we can feed ourselves, and that's all right. And me and Richard and I don't think we're super ambitious. We just like to make our games, and we're just happy, working in our little hovels.
So how dare you? How dare you? Sorry, go ahead, Fred.
I was just going to say that's the way we started. Definitely through. I mean, we had a publisher, and so we were getting paid, although we were late, so we weren't getting paid at the end. But and then big corporations, the last 20 years with Activision, and then now we're back to the situation you guys are in, which I like.
Yeah, I read that. I read your webpage, like, they did full circle. That's very interesting. We're just not moving at all. We're just staying at the top of the circle and not doing
Hey, if you're happy, it's only your detractors will complain. How, like, as you work on project to project, how do you approach, I just call it community or audience? Like, what's your relationship with, like, okay, I have to make a game and now I'm going to sell it. Do you work with publishers? Do you just have a core audience who you communicate with directly?
You can take this one. I'm talking too much.
Oh, well, the short answer is we're just really bad at it, to be honest with you. It's I mean, like, neither of us are super social. I mean, it's difficult. I try to get out in front of the people and do like little YouTube videos for updates and stuff. And I work with a PR company. Andrew's got a publisher for his current game, but yeah, that's the toughest thing, is to just get it out there and get people to look at it. Like, I've got 2 games that I've worked on my own since Spaz 2. So there's Golftopia and then No Creeps Were Harmed, and they review really well, but it's tough it's just so hard to get people to look at them, and even now, like with Golftopia, it's been like 3 years since I touched it, and I'll get like the odd reviewer mails like, this is the best game I've ever played. It's like, would have been nice if you played it 3 years ago and not picked it up for $1 though. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough. It's like we're scraping by, but yeah, I mean, how many trillions of games are there on Steam now? It's just, I find like just getting out in front of the market. I mean, like my last game came out and I could not get anywhere with it because of Baldur's Gate. That's all that anybody cared about. So, I mean, just trying to get out in front of some of these games is like, wow, it's tough. And it's always been pretty hard, and it seems to be just getting harder. So that I think that the PR is probably our weak point a bit.
Yeah, we don't spend enough time on that kind of thing. It's almost like we need a person for that, but with how our dynamic works, I don't think we could have one. The two voices thing works really well, and as soon as we had three, then somebody's going to get voted out instead of the argument, which is what we need. But we both on Steam, we talk to people on the forums. Sometimes I will have to not check Steam for a couple of days because it can be emotionally exhausting, because people can be quite rough, and you have to develop a very thick skin. And sometimes it also it's like having a whole bunch of mini project managers poking at you, and it makes it hard to prioritize your time. I prefer Discord. The people I'm talking to are already kind of on board with the game and love it. And then that's much more uplifting, but you have to still dive into the Steam forum, and you have to sometimes take the hate and see what's wrong with the game, but it can't be every day because it really sucks the wind out of the sails sometimes. So it's tough. That part is tough. And sometimes you can't say what you think, because you say, yes, sir, I'm sorry that the game made you sad, and I'm the worst. But you're thinking, oh man, do you sit the right way?
You have to own it. You'd say, yes, it's by design. I'm glad you had my desire is for someone to have an emotional experience, and I succeeded.
I remember the first tutorial in Spaz 2 is a tutorial on how to read tutorials. Don't go complain along the Galactic forums, or you will be destroyed. Read or die.
So yeah, that part is super tough. And as Richard says, trying to get people to actually see the game nowadays is extremely difficult. When we started in 2011, there weren't that many indies out there. It was a handful. And well, it was 2009 when we actually left. It came out in 2011. So there was a handful of people. It was really easy to be seen. Like when you came out on Steam in 2011, you were visible for, like in the new list, maybe 5 days. It was there wasn't a huge rate of games coming through. Now it's, if you're unlucky, it's like 5 minutes. It's like you have to actually time your release time such that it will hopefully be after the other release times that day, so that you will be visible, kind of thing. It's like, oh my goodness, it's tough. That's what the publisher is great for. So that's one thing I'm very thankful for, is that they do that for me. I don't touch the Steam page. I don't sign up for all the marketing events. I don't do any of that stuff because I'm terrible at it. I don't know they exist. I can literally just get up, flop into my chair, and just start coding every day. And I think that works really well, but that's for me. Yeah.
It's good to know your strengths or your weaknesses, which usually go hand in hand somehow.
I'm only good at one thing.
Yeah, that's why I had to remind to drag them in. Like, come on, there's people to meet, and then they'll be like, thank goodness this is over. Don't tell them don't tell them I said that. Oh shoot, that's right. It's interesting regarding the I'll just call it the naysayer effect, which happens in online communities or in real life and in corporate environments and in friend groups everywhere, which is there's always someone who wants to poo-poo anything, no matter what it is. I just assume they're going to be there. And I unfortunately know myself too well, and I know I'm programmed to listen to the naysayer and give them a lot of attention. And what I found, because I have the opposite curse, which is actually really like talking to people. And if I didn't have work to do, I would spend all day just talking to people. And so it's my idea of fun, and it isn't necessarily emotionally draining. I actually really get a lot out of it. But then I realize, oh, wait a minute, hang on, I have to like focus, and we're trying to produce something, I'm responsible for this game. So one thing I've found pretty successful with our community, and maybe it's just unique because we have something, we're lucky, not a lot of indies have a community already excited for what you're doing. Like, it's just such a blessing to have people who already know what you're doing. You don't have to convince them of anything. You just say, like, we can get up and say it is the sequel to the Ur-Quan Masters, and we can even say like who's involved and whatever. And that means a lot to some people, and they've stuck around for 30 years, or they're new fans. And I actually don't know, what the makeup is of our audience. But one thing I've found pretty successful and pretty fun is, in our community, if you, rather than like finding the naysayer and go and saying like, oh yeah, sorry, you're not going to get what you want or whatever, and have to deal with that one person, empowering other community members to be excited for you, so if you get enough people stirred up in a good way, it seems like they do a good job convincing each other that like, hey, it's all going to be fine, but finding tools to empower your sort of biggest supporters or cheerleaders or whatever in the community is still like a learning process for us, I've found. But it's also pretty gratifying to see like, oh, this is way easier and way less emotionally draining than just focusing on someone who's upset about something.
Right. Yeah.
Because there is always going to be someone upset about something. That's how the world works, I guess. I think
No
people
kidding.
work. But
Yeah,
but it's worked well for us.
I understand what you're saying there too. Like when I see something negative, I tend to give it about 10 times the weight of something positive.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't, but I can't not, It's like, oh, how can I fix that? What can I do? Although sometimes it's just like, okay, this person there is no helping this person. Like that will happen sometimes as well. Like there is no way I can make this person understand, and I'll have to just wash my hands of it because, they literally will sit on the toilet the wrong way around. I know it, so I can't.
I hope you said that to someone before.
I can't fix it, but if I can fix it, it will definitely weigh on my mind until I do. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is the same for me. There's probably a lot of deep emotional childhood trauma there, but we won't talk about this. This is all just a fun chat. And we have no dry humor here. But I am curious, like, sorry, I told Fred you were here when I said this, but actually fired up Space Zombie, Space Pirates and Zombie, sorry, words, right order, Baz. I can use acronyms, I swear. I fired it up again last night after not playing it for a long time. And it's interesting that you mentioned like Melee was like influential for that. And when I played it, like I say this just full, no shame or anything, but I played it and I thought Escape Velocity when I first played it. And that was like, for me, I've said Escape Velocity to a lot of people and nobody knows what I'm talking about, because I think you had to have grown up with like a Macintosh computer and it was like a shareware game from Ambrosia Software or
Sounds
something. I don't
familiar.
even remember. But like Escape Velocity was what jumped into my brain as much even faster. Granted, I played that much earlier than I played Ur-Quan Masters. But I was just curious, like, did you guys play Escape Velocity?
Never.
Googling it.
It came up so many times
That's so
in
funny.
people's reviews. I had never played it, still haven't played it actually, but it just kept coming up. People kept saying Escape Velocity. No,
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like, it's top-down space combat. Look, there were a lot of games that had a spaceship that flew around, and okay, now we've got the fire truck, so the birds are even more excited. But it's funny because I played it anyway. I was playing it last night, and again, I had the same thought right away, which is like, oh, it's Escape Velocity. This reminds me of like my childhood, and it was so warm and fuzzy. But one thing I just kind of wanted to ask about, like on a mechanical sense, maybe this is too nuts and bolts, but I find it interesting. So we have an imaginary player who's never played the Ur-Quan Masters, and they're used to playing, whatever games they've been playing. And maybe they like sci-fi games, maybe they like space games, and they're about to pick up Melee for the first time. I actually think like Melee is actually kind of difficult. If you've never played it before, it's really fast. If you fire up Ur-Quan Masters, like it's fast. Even at 24 frames per second, it's pretty fast. The controls with like the fun physics and the gravity wells are cool when you get used to them and master them, but it's a steep learning curve if you don't know what you're doing. And one thing I really enjoyed about like Spaz is oh, I can strafe, and I can stop moving if I want to. And sort of the sense of like, okay, there's physics, but I have a little more control here. That deviates from, at least in my brain, the melee formula of like, you can't slow down. All you can do is turn and thrust, and good luck. Was
Right.
was there a process where you actually intentionally deviated from that? Like, how did that come about? Because I find it really interesting.
Well, that one is kind of interesting because I was actually watching ships from Babylon 5 for a while.
Oh,
And I was watching space combat, and even in a very early version, I had a little Babylon 5 fighter that was shooting, and I was like, okay, I like how they move. But yeah, they do tend to, like, they just do quick flips and turns, but it definitely was an evolution over time. The strafing, I haven't thought about it in a while, but I guess it is kind of unique. Actually, that you have the side to side motion. A lot of people didn't like the controls. I
Oh,
really
it was
liked them.
tough. It was hard to wrap your head around, like having the ship relative controls, especially when the ship is pointed down.
yeah.
I mean, after a few hours, you'd get used to it. But yeah, the controls were pretty complicated for some people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have, I mean, this is like an honest question. Like, we have the same challenge in Melee, because right now we have a very what's the right word? A very honest and true representation of Melee, recreation of it. And it is exactly the same thing where, yeah, your ship's pointing down, your left key is now your right key, it's relative to your ship. At some point, I haven't done this yet. At some point, I'd really want to try a camera that stays locked to the ship orientation and spins with you. It might be the vomit cam. I'm not sure yet.
I was gonna say it's got
My gut is it will be, but maybe there's a way to make it a little
With
more
the Ari
colorful.
Lou, yeah.
Yeah, I'm really not sure, but I do think like that onboarding players is going to be hard. But like you said, Richard, like after you play for a couple hours, you'll mind meld with it, and then it'll make sense to you. But the beginning entry, especially for, like, I'm thinking again about modern gamers and people who play that, it's pretty tough. So I'm just curious, like, did you just accept that and say, hey, you're going to have to get used to this, but when you do, it's going to be fun? Did you like experiment with different controls? Did you try even onboarding players and telling them things? What was that like for you?
Oh, well, we kind of just, it worked for us, and then we went plump. Here you go. It's like, we get it.
We believe in it. Yeah.
I think at one time we tried a camera relative system, but it was like impossible to get the ship to go at full speed if you were pointing in a diagonal, because like the keyboard, right? You only got 8 axis there, so it was no. But yeah, we did kind of just sort of get used to it after, because we built it. So it's like, yeah, it's rough for us for a while, but then after a couple of days working, yeah, people should be able to get this, right? I'm not sure how they'd be able to digest it now. People expect to just drop into a game and master it within a few seconds, and if they don't like it, you're getting a review otherwise. But I mean, Spaz 2 was 3D, so we didn't have that problem. But yeah, the controls were hard, but once you get used to it, it's responsive, right?
Yep. That was what I really appreciated. And actually, I think like it's a core tenet for Ur-Quan Masters gameplay in general, but especially Melee, is direct control. Push button, get result. Push button, get result. And like I love in Spaz actually adding the mouse has a whole new flavor to it of just like, oh my gosh, I'm piloting a ship. I haven't felt this way since I got to play MechWarrior 2 at my friend's house with like a joystick in my hand or something. Like, seriously, it has a really cool
speaking Andrew's language over here.
Yeah, that's the other game that I never shut up about.
That's funny. Yeah, well, no, it has a really cool, like, hand feel or something. And I would talk about this even in our development streams, like, hey, what you're looking at might look weird, but it feels right with my hands on the keyboard. And you're watching me play, and you can't appreciate this, but with my hands on the keyboard, it's good. So that's something you kind of have to, I guess, as you're saying, well, it feels right to us, and you have to hope that someone else is going to have some of the same experience.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, they're finally settling down. You good? Okay. Aside, I mean, Spaz is like very combat oriented, as you go through it, but there's also procedural generation, right? That's a huge aspect of the world creation. And what was your, like, I know, Fred, you had some thoughts about this with Ur-Quan Masters, but did you have like a starting point for procedural generation or a goal? Like, how did you approach that from a creative standpoint, or from a, hey, here's what we're trying to achieve? Is it like 1 million hours of replayability? Is it, what were the sort of like tenets or tent poles? Gosh, I sound like such a corporate person. what were the guiding principles, or what inspired you to go with procedural generation? What were you hoping to get out of it?
You want to go for it, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could jump in at some point, but like for the art and stuff, it was because I did all the art for both games. Because I remember I did look at like Ur-Quan Masters, and like I did really appreciate like all the colors that you guys had in the game. And I remember playing like Freelancer at the time, and I'm like, yeah, we have to do it like this. We have to do it like not the boring colonial marine look. I mean, as cool as Aliens is, it's really dried black and silver, boring. So I kind of was like, all right, can we make a procedural system that can put together like a nebula with a planet in it and color them in a way like, so I spent a lot of time like looking at like color theory, like what makes something kind of attractive. So like, you know, if you got like 75% of one color and then 20% on the opposite end of the color wheel, and then like 5% kind of on the tangent of that, and then I would assign them to things like cloud layers, moons, the various biomes of the planet. Like, believe it or not, like Spaz 1 and even Spaz 2, like you could fit them on a CD. Most of the art is just grayscale, and I would mush together certain layers and then color them appropriately. And like, so the art will just spit stuff out forever. But even in Spaz 1 and 2, like as far as like the shape of the solar system goes, you can scale the game down to something that you could complete in a few hours, or you could scale it up and you'll be at it for 200 hours. Because I know Andrew was very much into the Ur-Quan Masters. I mean, I was too, but I was also like cracked out on Diablo at the time. So I was, because like, you know, I really had a hate for like World of Warcraft at the time, because I was expecting it to kind of scratch a Diablo itch, and I wasn't really into MMOs. I'm like, no, I like games that if I'm really into it, I can kill this thing in like 30 hours or 20, 30 hours and not have to like sit there for 20, 30 years. But, you know, I definitely didn't want to do a ton of like specifically made art. So we made a lot of procedural art systems. And we also just did that with like the way the game was built, the systems, like the ships, the star map, let players play for the length of time they want. And then, you know, like, you know, a lot of players will just play on normal, which would have been about, I guess, 12 hours. But yeah, you can retool the system, or you'd be at it for like almost 100 hours if you wanted. So that's kind of, we always kind of have this idea where we let the player fiddle with things and play it how they want. You know, we've got like a brutally easy mode where you get so much experience points and money, and the enemies are weak. We got insane mode that I don't even know if we can beat it. But and I mean, we kind of adopt that with all of our projects. We let the player do what they want, play it as long as they want, and the way they want. I don't really care for like FromSoft games for that reason. I want my easy mode. But,
yes, same with my aged reflexes. I can't handle that.
yeah.
No, that's really cool. It's very inspiring to hear that it's sort of solving multiple things for you all at once, which is neat. And like actually let the player have their own fun is that's a tough one to, you know, describe to people too sometimes, because it's very open-ended. You know, there's things like modding and whatever that kind of start to touch that stuff. And yeah, I was going to go somewhere with it. I'm like, no, that's just too rambly. I'm just going to stop. But yeah, I find it very inspiring. And so I'm not even going to add anything because I can't top that.
One thing about the procedural systems that I very much like is I like to be able to create a set of rules instead of large amounts of content. So I can create a very, very specific like way the game will play, right? Tons and tons of AI so that the agents understand the world. And then I can just say to the computer, now build it, right? But then I don't have to create actual content. I just create rules for creating content. And that's very nice. I've I think we've done that in all our games. Like we don't make handcrafted, like aside from, Richard, you do make the ships obviously and the parts, but beyond that, like how the star systems are built and what the economies are and all those things, that's just a very complex roll of the dice based on a seed. And I like it that way because you can scale that infinitely if you want, which is really nice.
Work smarter, not harder, right?
I was going to say, I mean, my internet cut out, so I probably missed all. I'm probably going to repeat everything that everybody else already said, but certainly for me on Ur-Quan Masters 1, it was a lot of it was self-preservation.
Yeah.
Because there were only two of us, and we didn't know how we were going to do all the art and a lot of the game design, and so having it be procedurally generated just kind of solved those problems for us. Obviously on a game like Skylanders, it almost none of it could be procedurally generated. So it really depends on the type of game too. But yeah, a space game with lots of planets and galaxies and is a perfect candidate for procedural generation.
Oh yeah, I mean we've all probably played the original Elite. That was my first exposure to that. I played that way back when I had a Commodore 128 at the time. I think, or was it the Amiga? It was one or the other. Anyway, it was ages ago, and they generated an entire galaxy. It's like, whoa, how did they do this? And then I've liked it ever since. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm here. I'm just fetching animal wrangling all day. It's like a zoo in here. I live with the chickens. Yeah, we didn't Ray West do one pseudo procedural generation experiment on Skylanders?
Yeah.
And very, very early on, we tried a few with like the Warcraft 3 map editor too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was ancient, but yes. It makes sense for space. And even what you brought up about like making lots of interesting planets, there's in a game about exploration, especially even a game where you just expect to see a lot of planets, you're going to get tired of seeing the same thing over and over and over and over. And so something that I think helps is just what you said, like find what's interesting about a colorful procedurally generated planet, see something new, and then get used to sort of having something fun around the corner. And at least in Ur-Quan Masters, it's important that the player wants to explore, or else there's a lot of game you probably won't play.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's like a core principle is you have to go out and find things that at its heart, if you know where everything is in Ur-Quan Masters, you can finish that game pretty fast. But if you don't know where anything is and you don't, or ideally you don't, but then it's you're mostly on the search for information in places.
I still remember when I first played it, because there was no internet, there was nothing, so I had to figure it out. And I had a sheet of paper, and I was writing down coordinates of planets so I could find them again on the star map. And oh yeah, this one's here, this one's here, this one's here, because there were a lot of stars, and yeah, it was. If you can recapture that in the sequel to Ur-Quan Masters, then yeah, that'll be awesome. I'll be all over that day one. That's the kind of thing I'll take a day off for. So yeah.
Will you be able to finish it in one day still? Because that's
I'm too old
our
now.
target.
I'm too old. I can't do it anymore.
It will finish him in one day.
Yeah,
that sounds like a quitter to me.
Yeah.
I guess the game just wasn't fun enough. I'm so sorry.
Just give up on sleep, man. It's easy.
Oh, my back has sadly said no over the years.
I mean, no, because you actually have a real experience with this. Like we're working on the sequel to a game that a lot of people played for the first time, or at least some people who are still around and are interested in following us. They played maybe 30 years ago, and it lives in their head in a really powerful way. And, I know there's games from my childhood that if I were to go pick them up and play them again, I'd go like, oh, I mean, I remember the first game I sat through and played in one sitting. It was actually Max Payne. And everything else I took my time on, or I was whatever. and responsibilities. But yeah, I remember that. I'm pretty sure if I went and picked it up, it wouldn't be as engrossing as I remember it. But in my head, it was the best thing ever. And until I think like Portal came out, and then I'm just like, oh my gosh, I love a game I can just sit down and play front to back without any interruption, and I get totally engrossed in. Games are too long, sort of what old man Dan would say right now. But the real question here is, hey, people had an experience of something, and we've all grown up and we've all changed, and I can't be a 6-year-old with no responsibilities anymore, just sitting in front of my computer. I think about family and bills and whatever, all sorts of responsibilities that carry us around. So we're making something, and we want to have nostalgia, and we want to lean into, like, I think even you said, like, the people don't make games like this anymore, that kind of thing, which is not necessarily true. Now the indie market has created a universe where there's a lot of, old ideas are new again, and it's really cool to see. So, hey, we're going to make the sequel to the Ur-Quan Masters, and like, Andrew, especially for you, like, what do you want when you pick that up? We're trying to go for a feeling. Of course, like gameplay, there's sort of expectations that are built in. But if you're like, oh, this is what I really want to have, like, now's your chance to straight up just ask the creators, okay, could you please do this? But it's like a real question too. Like, what do you expect, or what lives in your head? What's the fantasy that's there?
There was a feeling in Ur-Quan Masters of things being unveiled over and over again. It was a little bit beyond exploration. It was like, and you get like a little bit of goosebumps from it. I remember a few times when that happened. Even in the end credits with like the Mark II, I was like, oh, I remember that even. I was like, oh. So hopefully that's in the game. Hopefully there's a Mark II. I don't know. If
there wasn't a Mark II, I think there'd be a riot. Actually, I think if there's only a few things on that list, but like if FLIFO isn't around, if there's no Mark II, and maybe I think there's one other I can't remember right now, there'd be a riot. So
okay,
we got you covered.
Good. So the combat is very good and engaging, but the story and the unveiling of these events and wanting to know more, like, that's why I see, if it was just a combat, I could have put it down and go to bed, right? Because the combat would have been there, but I had to know the next thing. I had to see what was going to happen to this race, like things like seeing like one big blob on the map moving towards another blob, and then the little blob going, oops, and it's, oh no, what, I did something wrong, that's really, really neat. If I knew what the magic sauce was, I guess I would have done it myself as well. So I don't know how you did it. That's why I'm such a fanboy about this. Like, I could not put it down. Even when I replayed the open source version, like this was years later, I played it beginning to end. I didn't play it in one sitting, but I did not think about anything else. And I knew everything that was going to happen in the game. I did, at that point, I was able to cheat and I'd say, okay, so where is the Cyrene planet again? And I could just look it up online, like the coordinates and things. But yeah, it is awesome that the story and unveiling how things relate to each other, and having in the galaxy, things are actually moving, like things are happening. When you went from one star to another star, I think, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but the Ilwraith, you'd go through and then it would pop out of the star system, start chasing you in the warp map. Like, oh, stuff is happening here. It would make, or when, again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing any of this right, because it was when I was a kid.
Doesn't matter.
The Aralu, when you jump into their crazy quasi space, like, what's happening? Like, that's really cool. And you start to understand about these different races, like why they are special. It's cool. It's really, really cool. So hopefully they're all still around in some form.
No spoilers.
Yeah, no spoilers, but yeah. And the races were well written, and they were very different, right? Like, for some reason,
we did have different writers writing, so.
Okay, because I mean, like, I remember I don't know why it was, but the Utwig, I guess it was, with the
masks.
With the masks. It was so strange to me, and there's so much comedy in the game. Commander Zex, I remember, Perverted Vux. Oh, it was a good game. It was a good game. It wasn't all dark all the time, right? It was a dark theme because everyone's gonna die or be enslaved, but there was so much humor in it that it made it all okay as well. It's good. Yeah, I guess that's something Spaz has. We have humor, but it's really dark. There's this res monster.
People are dying, but but we laugh about it a little.
Yeah, little space dudes are getting
aren't they even called like mooks or something? What's
goons?
Goons, that's it. Yeah, even they're just called goons. I mean, like that
goons.
in itself is pretty like funny, but like, wait a minute, that's a person.
Yeah.
Well, we're just shooting them out of the airlocks, and you can see them freezing and turning into little balls, and then we're running them over with the spaceship.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Auto. It's like.
Yeah. So I guess that was something that also influenced Spaz then, because it's really dark, but it's also bright and colorful and funny at the same time. So yeah, I like that.
Cool. I mean, I really like that answer. I spoke with someone yesterday and they said something that at least I'd never heard before, but I thought was pretty cogent, which is every alien you met, you were excited to meet.
Yes.
And
sure.
I thought like, oh, that's true. And I think like just what you brought up, like they're different, they have a shtick, and it helps that they have like, you immediately understand one shtick, but then the shtick is connected to gameplay and it's connected to their ship. And like, yes, the Arilu look like this. And of course their spaceship looks like this. And of course their quasi space is like this. So being able to kind of like get an initial burst of who they are and then find their feelers in the universe is like a fun part of like unwrapping the present, so to speak. So you're excited to meet them, but then there's one more layer and there's one more layer, and that like sounded like when you're talking about it, that was sort of enchanting, and you wanted to know, oh, what's around the bend? What's around the bend? It
was never a hassle when I encountered one. Like at least for the first few times, like they were going to say something new and interesting. And it wasn't like, oh heck, do I have to deal with this fight? I was like, oh, this is interesting, I really like that. And you could kind of decide, it was on demand who you were going to be dealing with, because you had the power to get out of an area. You weren't fenced in. If you really didn't want to deal with the Korra, for example, and their stupid spinning death wheels, you just stayed out of there for a while. You can upgrade your mothership and come back and stomp them later. That's just how you do it.
Yeah.
Most people don't want to deal with the Korra. To be fair, you're not alone. Well, this is like, thank you so much for taking some time to like talk about this. It's like, I mean, Fred, the honor is all yours. I didn't work on Ur-Quan Masters. I'm just here working on this project. I'm a fanboy like you here working on a project. And I worked with Paul and Fred, and that's kind of how I wound up here. But I have my own story about how I didn't even know there was a story in the Ur-Quan Masters until much older. I just thought it was a cool space combat game. Seriously, I played it for a long time with my friend. And I didn't know there was a story until much later. But like Fred, I think all the honor is yours. I'm just here. I'm the happy host of the conversation, but it's still really nice to hear your kind words.
Yeah, I just like making things still, so that's what I want to do.
Good. Well, you made a good game. I'm very excited about the sequel. That is for sure.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And you guys made a good game too, because I played it again last night, and I'm like, gosh, this is fun. And gosh, I forgot how cool these controls felt. And I hadn't really played a game that controlled like that in a long time. And immediately gave this, like, again, the power fantasy, like hands on the controls that I really liked. So it was really cool just picking it up again after not playing it for a long time last night.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Cool. Well, we'll be in touch when we share this out, and like really appreciate the time. And I'm, really glad we could talk with you. It was really fun.
It was awesome talking with you guys too.
Yeah. Best of luck going forward.
Good luck with your side projects. I hope you have a nice argument again soon. And and we'll definitely be in touch.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Take care.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.